Hi there grade 12s, welcome to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. Today we're going to look at a OOP question. Before 2018, so 2017 backwards, the OOP question was in question 2. So therefore we're looking at 2016 question 2. We're starting with question 2.1 where we have to complete the class. In this paper you will still see other field names, and that was for Java questions, so you can just ignore them and make use of only the ones that start with F for Delphi. As always, we're going to do one question at a time, and the first question here is asking me to write a mutator. The moment I see the word mutator, I know that it's a procedure and it has to be public. And the method should be called setVisitDate. And here is that very important word receive. That means they are now going to indicate which parameters I need to create for this procedure. And it's only receiving one parameter, and that is a date, which needs to replace the current date that this group wanted to visit the aquarium. It's important to receive the parameter as the correct data type. And date could be either a string or it could be a date data type. So therefore, it's important to have a look at your attributes and the given fields that they have declared for you. And there you can see if visit date is a string. And for that reason, my set visit date has a date parameter, which is of data type string. Then you push Ctrl-Shift-C, and all this is doing is the parameter on the right is giving my field on the left a value. Remember, for constructors as well as for set procedures, which is mutators, we will have our fields first on the left of the assignment statement. In this question, they gave you the constructor create as well as some other code. So make sure you have a look at what was given so that you can use it further on in your program. Here we are asked to create a method required tour guide to return a word yes. Now the word return indicates it's a function and it's returning a yes or a no, so therefore the data type of this function would be string. Nowhere does it mention that it's receiving a value, so therefore it will not have any parameters. Press pause between each question so that you can try it yourself before I show you the memo. The best way to learn is by practicing. So here is my function required tour guide with a string return data type. And by default, I'll always put my methods here in public unless the question is stating otherwise. So read carefully. So for this function, all it needs to do is either return a yes or a no, whether they want a tour guide or not. I can either test if tour guide, the field that was Boolean, by saying if tour guide is equal to true, or I can even leave that out and it will do the same thing, as if statements test for Boolean values by default for true. So if they needed a tour guide, my result is going to be yes, else my result is going to return a no. We now need to write a method called isConfirmed, and it's receiving a value, so therefore it would have a parameter, and that would be the total number of visitors that are already attending the program. So therefore it would be an integer. We need to test if the current group in my class, where my number of guests are stored as F group size, if I should add F group size to this parameter value, it cannot exceed 500. 500 is the maximum per day. And then it needs to return, so there we can see it's a function, either a true or a false, whether there is space for this visitor or not. So here is my function, receiving that number of guests that are already booked for this excursion on a specific date. And I'm trying to add here my F group size. Should I add my current group size, which is a field, to this parameter value, and it is more than 500, they cannot join on that day, and my result will return a false, else the result will be true. You can also say if the number plus the group size is less or equal to 500, return a true, else return a false. Both would be correct. This question is asking us to write a method called calc_amount, and it will receive the cost per person. So there is the one parameter, cost per person, as well as the cost for a tour guide. So I have two parameters being received, and then it will calculate and return the total amount paid in the result. We also have to read this top part here, because here they indicate that they will give a free ticket for every 10 learners in a group. So we have to accommodate that. It's time to press pause and to try. Here's the declaration of calc_amount. It's receiving the two values. They're money values, so therefore I've declared them as real. And then when I calculate the amount, that would be real as well. In here, I've started with the result as 0. Because first of all, we needed to determine whether they needed a tour guide. If they needed a tour guide, my result will then be changed to the parameter that I received, and that would be my result starting point. If they didn't want a tour guide, my result will still be 0. You could also have added an else to this if statement to say else result is assigned to 0. But it was important to start your result off with a 0. Then we need to determine how many free tickets they get. And for this I used F group size, and I used div 10 because div, or you could also use divide by 10 and then trunk that answer, or even floor that answer. All three of those would work properly. So this will give me the amount of free tickets that I'm getting. And then I can add to my result whether it's going to be 0 or the cost of the tour guide. And very important is that you have these blue brackets that you see now to deduct the free tickets from the current group size. Remember BODMAS. So we have to first deduct and determine the number of tickets we're paying for, and then only do we multiply with P person, which is the cost per person. And finally, I have to complete the toString. So they have give me part of the declaration and code, and I have to make sure it looks like this. Remember, we don't need to add these brackets. These just indicate that they are either my field names or maybe even a function that we want to display here. So here's my toString. I start my result with the school name, the label, and then the field name, fname. Remember your #10 at the end to create those enters. And then I am adding to my result the next lines. So every line ends with a #10, and I'm using F group size and F visit date, the fields to display these. Remember to add your labels. There are marks allocated for the labels. And then finally, our required tour guide was returning a yes or a no for us. We've written that before. So I have just used required tour guide here to display either a yes or a no. Remember, before you move on to the main form, after usually your toString, that you save and run your program just to sort out any syntax errors that might be in your class. So this is now 2016 question 2.2, and they've provided you with a text file called data_q2.txt. This is what the data looks like, and what we are interested in is the date. So the new group is going to be going to this aquarium on a certain date. And we need to add all the numbers of existing visitors together. And then we need to use our class to see if there is space for this new group who would like to join on a specific date. And question 2.2.1 is asking us to instantiate the object. That just means that you have to call your constructor create. But before you can do that, you first need to get the input from the user as explained. Remember, when it says display a message using a dialog box, you can just use a show message. Press pause and try it yourself. First, we need to get the input from the user. So there I'm getting the name of the school from the text box. And then for the list box, remember you can also use items and then square brackets, list box name dot item index, and then also the number of learners in this new group. They have declared the object for you. So to remember how to instantiate, I always copy this line of code and I paste it where I want to instantiate it. I then add an equal sign to make an assignment statement, and then I add .create. And if you did everything correctly up to here and you open your brackets, it's going to give you hints. However, if the hints don't pop up, don't stop coding. Then you will have to just look at the constructor create. In this case, it was given, and make sure that you match your arguments that you're going to send them with the parameters as declared in your class. So here it was important that we match our arguments in Nod with our parameters. And here is the constructor create as declared in your class. So this constructor had 1, 2, 3, 4 parameters. Therefore, I need 4 arguments. That's the N for number. The O, order, very important is, even though the first 2 are strings, that we send the school name first and the date second. We can't swap them around. It will still run, but we'll get the wrong output. And then we need to send the number of learners, and then whether they need a tour guide or not. And then the D for not stands for data type, so I need 2 strings, 1 integer, and 1 Boolean variable. And don't forget to display this message. There will be a mark allocated for this as one of the easy marks in the paper. Let's just do the top part of question 2.2.2 first, where we have to write a method called determine date total. It receives a date, therefore it has a parameter, and you will see that it returns the total number of visitors that are already visiting the aquarium on that specific date as it is stored in the text file. So since the word return is there, it means this is a function. Press pause and try it yourself. Here is determine date total, receiving a parameter as a string because it's the date, and we could see that the date was a string. Also, we're reading from the text file, so therefore we would need it in a string format. And it's returning an integer, the number of people that visited, that already are going to visit on this specific date. And as usual, I will start with if file exists, and my begin and end with a show message, as well as my exit. I've just used result, but you could use iCount. Just remember that at the end that you have to assign then result to iCount. So I prefer to use result because I don't have to declare that extra variable. Our normal assign file, reset file, while not end of file, and read line as we did in grade 11. Always place a line from your text file as a comment inside of your while loop so you can see what you're dealing with. We are not actually interested in the name of the schools that are going, but what we do need to see is that the date that they are visiting, does that match the parameter? So what I've used is my pos to see if the parameter is in this line that I've just read from the text file. If the pos returns a value greater than 0, it means that that line in the text file is visiting on that date, and now I'm really interested in that last number. And to get hold of that number, I have just used pos and delete. I'm not interested in the name, that will get rid of the first part. And then pos and delete, getting rid of the date, because I already know that the date is the same as my parameter. And then I am left in my string with just the number. So all I have to do here is add to my result, string to int, and S line. This is the end of my while loop. Don't forget your close file. Now we need to make use of this determine date total in my button. And I have to then send it a parameter. And I also then need to call is confirmed to determine whether the school is able to go on that specific date and if there is space for them. If the school is allowed to visit, then we're going to use calc amount to calculate the amount that must be paid. And they have explained here that the cost per person to visit the park and the cost to hire the tour guide have been declared as constants for you, as calc amount needs those 2 values to be sent to them through the arguments to the parameters. And here we're just displaying in a dialog box, again a show message, the information which would be my toString plus then this amount paid, that would be an extra line in my toString. This part here is explaining what to do if they can't visit the date and if there's no space for them as per your function is confirmed. You have to display a message again in a dialog box, and then you have to show the panel called P&L availability, which is currently hidden. You need to then determine all the dates in the list box for the availability using determined date total as well as is confirmed. And then you need to populate a combo box on this panel. Here are some examples of input and output if there's space, and then also if there's no space, there they also show you what your combo box should look like. Press pause and try it yourself. I've added a .clear here in case someone clicks on this button more than once. So my combo box updates every time that I click on this button. And then I'm going to use iDay to get the total number of visitors already visiting, and using my object.getVisitDate. Remember, I've already instantiated my object, so I can use getVisitDate as the date that needs to be sent to the parameter of determined date total. Now I can use the iDay, which is the number of people visiting on that day, with my isConfirmed function. So object.isConfirmed, in round brackets, I'm putting that number of visitors already in there. If this now returns a true, then I'm going to calculate the amount using now my function calcAmount and sending it my two constants declared for me, which is the cost per person as well as the tour guide. And here I'm displaying the toString, a #10 to create that empty line, and then amount paid, and then R amount and FF currency, 10, 2. If isConfirmed is returning a false, so they don't have space for them, I'm displaying no availability, then I'm going to make the panel visible. So I'm assigning that to true. What I'm doing at the bottom here is I am looping through my list box. And every time I'm looping, I'm sending determined date total, the new value in the list box. So I'm looping through the items 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Every time sending that date to determined date total, using then, remember, determined date total is returning the number of visitors on that day, testing it using my isConfirmed. If it returns a true, I then add that item from my list box, so that specific date, there is space for this group, I am adding that to my combo box using .items.add. It's important to now run and test your program with the example of input and output and see if your combo box creates these alternative dates. Then you can continue with the next question. In this button, the user will select from those dates that you just created in the combo box an alternative date that they would like to go to this program. You then need to display the school's information. The top part here is your toString, and then you also need to then display the amount to be paid below your toString in a show message. Remember, message displaying in a dialog box just means you need to use your show message. You also had to indicate if there were no alternative dates available for the school to go. Press pause and try it yourself. To determine if there were no dates available, your combo boxes actually have a getCount property, and if that count is 0, it means no dates were added to the combo box and it's still empty. That means there were no space or alternative dates for this group, and then I'm just displaying my show message there. Else we are going to get the input from the user for the new date that they selected, and then we're going to change their date by using setVisitDate, sending setVisitDate this string that the user selected. Then we need to calculate the amount by sending it those constants variables, the R cost per person and R tour guide. And in our show message, we display the toString. After the toString, you need a #10 because amount paid was below the toString, as well as this amount that you determined using your calc amount function. Make sure that you test your program and that it is working properly. Thank you for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. I hope your program worked. And for more activities and information about OOP, you can go to Dandelion Delphi Book 3. The only way to do well in programming paper 1 of IT is by practicing. Watching the videos is not enough, so make sure you go and download as many past papers as you can and do those OOP questions. Hope to see you soon.